Dr. Chen's hands moved swiftly over the weapon control console as the Shadow's Edge raced through space, pursued by an ever-growing swarm of Zephyrian vessels. The neural disruptor was housed in a specially modified torpedo casing, designed to penetrate the organic hull of a coral city and release its viral payload directly into the neural network. "Weapon armed and ready," Dr. Chen reported. "But Captain, we need to get much closer to ensure penetration of their hull." Louise checked their position relative to the largest coral city. They were still several thousand kilometers away, close enough to scan its surface features, but too far for a reliable weapon deployment. "Whisper, plot an intercept course with the primary target. Maximum stealth, minimum time." "Captain," Morrison warned, "that course will take us directly through their defensive perimeter. We'll be exposed to fire from at least 12 vessels. Do it anyway. We don't have a choice." The Shadow's Edge banked hard to starboard, its stealth systems working overtime to keep them hidden from the pursuing fleet. The coral city grew larger on the main screen, its surface revealing incredible detail as they approached. Louise could see massive apertures that might have been docking bays, flowing structures that looked like highways or neural pathways, and pulsing nodes that glowed with internal light. "It's beautiful," Dr. Martinez whispered. "It's an abomination," Morrison countered. "That thing has probably absorbed thousands of minds from dozens of species." As they closed the distance, the Zephyrian defenses became more aggressive. Energy beams lanced through the space around them, some passing close enough to make the ship's hull glow with ionization. The gravitic weapons were worse. They created spatial distortions that threatened to tear the ship apart even if they didn't score a direct hit. "Hull integrity at 87%, Whisper reported. "Stealth systems operating at 63% efficiency." "How much closer do we need to get?" Louise asked. 500 kilometers for optimal penetration," Dr. Chen replied. "But Captain, I'm detecting something unusual. The coral city's neural activity is increasing dramatically. It's almost as if it knows what we're planning." Louise felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that the coral city might be aware of their intentions was deeply unsettling. If it could somehow sense the neural disruptor. "Deploy the weapon now," she ordered. "We can't risk getting any closer." "Captain, at this range the penetration probability is only 47%. "Do it!" The neural disruptor launched from the Shadow's Edge like a shooting star, its modified torpedo casing glowing white-hot as it accelerated toward the coral city. Behind them, the pursuing Zephyrian fleet suddenly changed direction, dozens of vessels moving to intercept the weapon. "They're trying to stop it," Morrison observed. The race was breathtakingly close. The neural disruptor streaked through space toward its target, while Zephyrian energy beams tried to destroy it in flight. Several shots missed by mere meters, the near misses creating spectacular light shows in the vacuum. Then, just as the weapon was about to impact the coral city's surface, something unexpected happened. The entire structure began to change, its organic hull flowing like liquid to create a perfect sphere around the impact point. The neural disruptor struck the sphere and was absorbed without detonating. "What the hell just happened?" Louise demanded. Dr. Chen was frantically analyzing the sensor data. "Captain, the coral city somehow anticipated the impact point and created a protective barrier. The weapon is inside the structure, but it hasn't detonated. Can you trigger it manually?" "I'm trying, but something is interfering with the signal. It's as if the coral city is actively suppressing the detonation sequence." On the main screen, the coral city continued to pulse with bioluminescent patterns, now showing swirls of angry red and orange that seemed to indicate extreme agitation. The pursuing Zephyrian fleet had stopped their pursuit and was taking up defensive positions around their cities. "Whisper, are you detecting any changes in the coral cities?" "Negative, Captain. All structures are showing normal neural activity levels. The weapon appears to have been neutralized." Louise slumped in her command chair, feeling the weight of failure settling on her shoulders. The mission had been a disaster. Not only had they failed to deploy the weapon, but they had revealed humanity's intentions to the Zephyrians. When the invasion fleet reached Earth, they would be prepared for the magnetic shields and any other defenses humanity had prepared. "Captain," Dr. Martinez said suddenly, "I'm receiving another transmission from the Coral Cities. Put it on speakers." This time, the alien communication was different. Instead of the harsh, rejecting tones they had heard before, there was something almost musical in the harmonics. The mathematical patterns were more complex, suggesting concepts beyond simple negation. "They're trying to communicate," Dr. Martinez said, her excitement growing. "The patterns suggest curiosity? They want to understand why we attacked them." "Tell them we were defending ourselves," Louise said. "Show them the records of their invasion of Earth." Dr. Martinez worked quickly to encode the historical data into mathematical formats that the Zephyrians might understand. The transmission included images of the destroyed cities, records of the neural harvesting process, and documentation of the human lives that had been lost or absorbed. The response came within minutes, and this time Dr. Martinez was able to provide a rough translation. "They're saying they didn't understand. They thought we were non-sentient. The neural harvesting was their way of trying to communicate with us, to understand our neural patterns." Louise felt a mixture of hope and horror. They were trying to communicate by absorbing human minds? It appears so. They're a collective consciousness, so they assumed all intelligent life would communicate through neural integration. They didn't realize that the process was harmful to individual minds. What about their invasion? The destruction of our cities? Dr. Martinez listened to the ongoing transmission, her expression growing more confused. "They're saying they were trying to establish communication centers. They thought our cities were non-sentient structures that could be safely modified." The implications were staggering. The entire war between humanity and the Zephyrians had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The aliens hadn't been trying to conquer Earth. They had been trying to make contact in the only way they knew how. "Dr. Chen," Louise said, "is there any way to recover the neural disruptor?" "It's possible, but we need their cooperation. The weapon is somewhere inside the Coral City structure." Louise made a decision that would change the course of both species' histories. "Dr. Martinez, tell them we want to retrieve our weapon. Explain that we understand now that the conflict was based on miscommunication. Ask if they're willing to help us prevent it from detonating." The next several hours were the most surreal of Louise's life. Instead of fleeing from the Zephyrian fleet, the Shadow's Edge was guided to a docking bay inside the largest coral city. The bay itself was a marvel of biological engineering, a vast chamber lined with what looked like organic computers, all pulsing in synchronized patterns. "The atmosphere is breathable," Dr. Chen reported as they prepared for EVA. "The Coral City has somehow adjusted its internal environment to accommodate human physiology." Louise led the away team through the airlock, feeling like she was entering the belly of some enormous whale. The corridors were curved and flowing, their walls covered in coral-like growths that glowed with soft bioluminescence. The air smelled of ozone and something faintly floral. They were met by a delegation of Zephyrians, the first living members of the species any human had seen. They were tall and graceful, their bodies covered in what looked like living coral that grew in intricate patterns. Their faces were almost human in their basic structure, but their eyes were large and multifaceted like insect eyes, and they had no visible mouths. Communication was handled through Dr. Martinez's translation device, which converted the Zephyrians' harmonic language into audible speech. "Welcome, separate minds," the lead Zephyrian said, the translated voice sounding oddly mechanical. "We are curious about your individual existence. How do you coordinate without shared consciousness?" "We use language and cooperation," Louise replied. "We maintain our individual thoughts while working together toward common goals." "Fascinating. We did not know such a thing was possible. Your neural patterns are so isolated, we assumed you were non-sentient." Dr. Chen stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. "Can you show us where our weapon is located? The harmful device is contained in our deep neural structure. We prevented its activation, but we do not understand its purpose." Louise felt compelled to explain humanity's perspective on the conflict. We thought you were trying to conquer our world and harvest our minds for your own purposes. The neural integration process you used on our people caused terrible suffering." The Zephyrians exchanged harmonics that sounded distressed. "We did not know individual minds could experience suffering during integration. For us, joining the collective is a joyous experience. We thought we were offering your people the gift of shared consciousness. For humans, individual consciousness is precious," Dr. Martinez explained. "We value our separate thoughts and memories. Having them absorbed into a collective would be like death to us. We understand now. We will find a way to reverse the integration process for your people. But first, we must address the harmful device." They were led deeper into the Coral City, through chambers that defied human understanding of architecture. The walls weren't just alive, they were thinking, pulsing with neural activity that Louise could somehow sense at the edge of her perception. "The collective is observing you," their guide explained. "We are sharing this experience with all our cities across the galaxy. This is the first time we have encountered truly individual minds." They finally reached the chamber where the neural disruptor was contained. The weapon sat in the center of a spherical room, surrounded by what looked like organic circuits that were working to keep it from detonating. "Your device is designed to sever neural connections," the Zephyrian said. "If it had activated, it would have killed thousands of our people and destroyed our shared consciousness." Dr. Chen carefully examined the weapon, noting how the Zephyrian technology had interfaced with its detonation mechanism. "They've essentially performed surgery on the device," he reported. "They've isolated the viral agent and prevented it from dispersing." "Can it be safely removed?" Louise asked. "Yes, but Captain, there's something else. The way they've interfaced with our technology, they've essentially learned how to build neural disruptors themselves. If they wanted to, they could use this knowledge to attack human neural networks." Louise felt a chill of fear, but the Zephyrian guide seemed to sense her concern. "We will not use this knowledge as a weapon," it said. "We understand now that separate minds must be protected, not absorbed. But we can use this technology to reverse the integration process for your people." Over the next several days, Louise and her team worked with the Zephyrians to develop a plan for freeing the absorbed human minds. The process was complex and dangerous. The human consciousness had to be carefully separated from the collective without damaging either the individual mind or the Coral City's neural networks. "We have identified 47 human minds that were integrated during your first contact," the Zephyrian scientist explained. "The integration was incomplete in most cases, which makes separation possible. But some individuals may have suffered permanent changes to their neural structure. We have to try," Louise said. "Even if we can only save some of them, it's worth the attempt." The separation process took place in a specialized chamber deep within the Coral City. Louise watched through the transparent organic walls as the Zephyrian bioengineers worked to extract human consciousness from their collective network. It was like watching brain surgery performed on a cosmic scale. The first human to be freed was Admiral Thorne's grandson Tommy. The 8-year-old boy materialized on a bioorganic platform, his eyes closed and his breathing shallow. Dr. Chen immediately began monitoring his vital signs while a Zephyrian medic worked to stabilize his neural patterns. "His brainwaves are normalizing," Dr. Chen reported. "The integration was superficial enough that separation was relatively clean." Tommy's eyes opened, and he looked around the chamber with confusion and fear. When he saw Louise, he began to cry. "I want to go home," he said. "I don't want to hear the voices anymore." Louise knelt beside him, taking his small hand in hers. "You're safe now, Tommy. The voices are gone. We're going to take you home to your grandfather." Over the next week, 39 of the 47 absorbed humans were successfully freed from the collective. The remaining 8 had been too deeply integrated, their individual consciousness permanently merged with the Zephyrian network. They remained alive and aware, but they were no longer entirely human. The journey back to Earth took on a completely different character than the trip out. Instead of racing against time to prevent an invasion, Louise found herself serving as an ambassador between two species that had almost destroyed each other through misunderstanding. The Zephyrian invasion fleet had been recalled from the edge of the solar system and was now en route to Proxima Centauri. In its place, a single coral city was making the journey to Earth, not as a conqueror, but as an ambassador. "The collective has voted," their Zephyrian guide explained during one of their daily communication sessions. "We wish to establish proper contact with your species and learn from your individual consciousness." Louise was in her quarters, reviewing the mission reports she would have to submit to Admiral Thorne and the World Council. "How do you explain that everything humanity thought it knew about the enemy was wrong?" "Whisper," she said to her ship's AI. "What's your analysis of the Zephyrian communication methods?" "Their harmonic language is remarkably sophisticated, Captain. It allows for the transmission of complex emotional and conceptual information in ways that human language cannot match. However, it also assumes a level of shared consciousness that makes individual thought processes difficult to express. Do you think peaceful coexistence is possible?" "Based on current data, yes. Both species have demonstrated the ability to learn and adapt their behavior based on new information. The primary challenge will be developing communication protocols that account for the fundamental differences in consciousness structure." Louise nodded, then activated her communication console. She had been postponing this conversation, but it couldn't be delayed any longer. Admiral Thorne's image appeared on the screen, her expression tense with worry. "Captain Reeves, what's your status?" "We've lost contact with the Zephyrian invasion fleet. Admiral, they've withdrawn. The mission was successful, but not in the way we expected." Louise took a deep breath. "The war is over, but not because we destroyed them. It's over because we learned to communicate." She spent the next hour explaining everything that had happened: the failed deployment of the neural disruptor, the breakthrough in communication, the revelation that the entire conflict had been based on misunderstanding. Admiral Thorne listened without interruption, her expression cycling through disbelief, hope, and finally, cautious acceptance. "You're telling me that the Zephyrians weren't trying to conquer us? That they thought they were helping us?" "Exactly. Their entire species operates as a collective consciousness. The idea of individual minds was completely foreign to them. When they tried to absorb human consciousness, they thought they were offering us the gift of shared awareness." "And our people who were taken prisoner?" 39 of them have been freed and are returning with us. They'll need extensive psychological treatment, but Dr. Chen believes most of them will make a full recovery." Admiral Thorne was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "Captain, the World Council will need to approve any formal diplomatic contact. And there are those who will want revenge for the deaths caused during the first invasion." "I understand, Admiral. But I hope you'll help me convince them that this is an opportunity, not a threat. The Zephyrians have technology that could revolutionize human civilization: biological computers, neural interface technology, space propulsion systems we can barely comprehend. And in return, we can offer them something they've never had: the perspective of individual consciousness." The transmission ended, leaving Louise alone with her thoughts. She knew the path ahead would be difficult. There would be those on both sides who preferred the simplicity of war to the complexity of peace. But for the first time since the conflict began, she felt hope. 2 months later, the Shadow's Edge arrived at Sol Station to find a transformed human civilization. The defensive installations remained in place, but they were no longer aimed at the stars in expectation of invasion. Instead, they had been converted into communication arrays, designed to facilitate ongoing contact with the Zephyrian collective. The Coral City ambassador had arrived a week earlier and was now in orbit around Earth, its bioluminescent patterns creating a new star in the night sky. The sight was both beautiful and deeply symbolic, a reminder that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than humanity had ever imagined. 6 months after her return from Proxima Centauri, Captain Louise Reeves stood in the newly constructed Embassy of Collective Consciousness, watching human and Zephyrian scientists work together to develop new forms of communication technology. The building itself was a marvel of hybrid architecture, flowing organic curves that housed traditional human technology, creating a space that felt comfortable to both species. "The neural interface is working better than we expected," Dr. Martinez reported, gesturing to a device that looked like a cross between a helmet and a living coral. Humans can experience a limited form of collective consciousness without permanent integration. It's completely reversible and allows for unprecedented understanding between individuals. Louise watched as a human volunteer, a linguistics professor from Cambridge, put on the interface and immediately began communicating with a Zephyrian researcher through harmonics that bypassed language entirely. The conversation was about mathematical concepts, but the emotional undertones were clearly visible on both participants' faces. "Any side effects?" Louise asked. "Some temporary disorientation, and users report unusual dreams for several days afterward. But nothing harmful. Dr. Chen believes it's just the human brain processing the experience of shared consciousness." Admiral Thorne approached from across the laboratory, her expression more relaxed than Louise had seen it in years. The weight of preparing for interstellar war had been replaced by the excitement of interspecies cooperation. "Captain, I wanted to let you know that the World Council has approved the establishment of permanent diplomatic relations with the Zephyrian Collective. You've been selected to serve as Earth's first ambassador to their civilization." Louise felt a mixture of honor and trepidation. "Admiral, I'm not sure I'm qualified for diplomatic work. You're the person who prevented a war and established first contact. I can't think of anyone more qualified." Thorne smiled. "Besides, the Zephyrians specifically requested you. They trust you." Across the laboratory, Tommy Thorne was playing with a group of children while wearing a modified neural interface that allowed him to communicate with a young Zephyrian, if such terms even applied to a collective species. The boy who had once been terrified of coral dreams was now laughing as he shared thoughts and images with an alien mind. "How is he doing?" Louise asked. "Better than anyone expected. Dr. Chen thinks his early exposure to the collective, traumatic as it was, gave him a unique understanding of how their consciousness works. He's become our best translator for emotional concepts." Louise watched the children play, seeing in their easy acceptance of the alien visitors a glimpse of humanity's future. For these kids, Zephyrians wouldn't be terrifying enemies but neighbors, friends, perhaps even something approaching family in the expanded sense that collective consciousness allowed. "What about the neural disruptor technology?" Louise asked. "Are we developing safeguards?" Admiral Thorne's expression became serious. "The weapon has been dismantled, and all research data has been transferred to joint human-Zephyrian oversight. Both species have agreed that such weapons are too dangerous to exist. If we encounter other hostile species in the future, we'll find non-genocidal solutions. And if the Zephyrians hadn't been willing to communicate? If they had been truly hostile? Then we would have used the weapon and lived with the consequences. But Louise, that's not what happened. You gave peace a chance, and it worked." That evening, Louise stood on her apartment balcony, looking up at the Coral City Ambassador that hung in Earth's orbit like a new moon. Its bioluminescent patterns were synchronized with the aurora borealis, creating a light show that was visible across half the planet. Scientists still didn't understand how the Zephyrians were manipulating Earth's magnetic field to create the effect, but the beauty of it was undeniable. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from the Coral City. She had learned to understand basic Zephyrian harmonics during her extended stay in their civilization, and the message was a simple one: gratitude, friendship, and an invitation to visit whenever she wished. Louise responded with her own harmonic pattern, one that conveyed hope for the future and satisfaction with the present. It was a crude approximation of Zephyrian communication, but she knew they would understand the emotional content if not the precise meaning. As she prepared for bed, Louise reflected on the mission that had changed everything. Operation Deep Strike had been intended to end an interstellar war through genocide. Instead, it had ended the war through understanding. The weapon designed to destroy an entire species had instead become the catalyst for unprecedented cooperation between civilizations. She thought about the 47 humans who had been absorbed into the Zephyrian collective, and the 8 who remained integrated by choice. They served as permanent bridges between the species, living proof that consciousness could take forms beyond individual human experience. Their sacrifice had been involuntary, but it had ultimately saved both civilizations from mutual destruction. Tomorrow, she would begin her formal training as Earth's first interstellar ambassador. She would learn the complex protocols of collective consciousness communication, study Zephyrian culture and history, and prepare for a role that no human had ever filled before. It was a daunting responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity. The war that had threatened to destroy humanity had instead opened the door to a larger universe, one filled with wonders and possibilities that previous generations could never have imagined. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Louise had learned in the coral cities of Proxima Centauri. The universe was not a hostile place filled with enemies, but a vast community of minds waiting to understand each other. As she drifted off to sleep, Louise's dreams were filled with harmonic patterns and bioluminescent light, the songs of a collective consciousness welcoming humanity to the greater galaxy. The coral wars were over, but the real adventure was just beginning. The starport on Luna was bustling with activity as ships from a dozen different species came and went. The Zephyrian coral cities had introduced humanity to the greater galactic community, a loose confederation of intelligent species that had been exploring and cooperating for millennia. Ambassador Louise Reeves walked through the diplomatic quarter, her neural interface allowing her to communicate with a crystalline entity from the Rigel system about establishing trade agreements for exotic matter. The conversation was conducted in pure mathematics, concepts flowing between minds without the limitation of language. Behind her, a group of human children played with Zephyrian younglings and gaseous beings from the Vega system, their laughter translated into harmonics and electromagnetic pulses that all the species could understand. The playground equipment was itself alive, a Zephyrian bioconstruct that could reconfigure itself to accommodate any form of life. "Ambassador," her aide called, "the Collective Council is ready for your report on the Centauri negotiations." Louise nodded and made her way to the council chamber, where representatives from 17 different species were gathered to discuss the ongoing expansion of the galactic community. The Zephyrians were represented by a living coral structure that had been grown specifically for diplomatic functions, its bioluminescent patterns translating the collective's thoughts into concepts other species could understand. "The negotiations were successful," Louise reported to the assembly. "The silicon-based entities of Alpha Centauri have agreed to join the community, with the understanding that their crystalline consciousness will be respected and protected." A wave of approval rippled through the chamber, each species expressing satisfaction in their own way. The lessons learned from the human-Zephyrian conflict had become the foundation for all first contact protocols: assume intelligence, attempt communication, respect differences in consciousness structure. After the session, Louise took a transport to Earth, where she visited the Memorial of Understanding, a monument erected at the site of the first Zephyrian landing. The memorial honored both the humans who had died in the initial misunderstanding and the Zephyrians who had been killed by Earth's defenses. But more importantly, it celebrated the breakthrough in communication that had prevented a tragedy of galactic proportions. Tommy Thorne, now 13 and serving as one of Earth's premier xenolinguists, met her at the memorial. "Ambassador, we've received a communication from the Deep Survey Fleet. They've made contact with another collective consciousness species in the Tau Ceti system. They're requesting a diplomatic team." Louise smiled, remembering her fear and uncertainty during those first desperate days when war seemed inevitable. Now, first contact was routine, a celebration rather than a crisis. "Prepare the Shadow's Edge," she said. "We have work to do." As they walked back toward the spaceport, Tommy asked the question that had been bothering him for months. "Ambassador, do you ever wonder what would have happened if the neural disruptor had worked? If we had destroyed the Zephyrians?" Louise considered the question seriously. "We would have committed genocide and denied ourselves the greatest opportunity in human history. We would have remained alone in a galaxy full of potential friends, too afraid to trust and too quick to destroy what we didn't understand. Do you think we made the right choice?" Louise looked up at the evening sky, where the lights of dozens of different species ships could be seen moving between the stars. In the distance, a Zephyrian coral city was departing for the Andromeda Galaxy, carrying human ambassadors to establish contact with entirely new forms of consciousness. "Tommy, I think we made the only choice that mattered. We chose to listen instead of shoot, to understand instead of destroy. And because of that choice, we're not alone anymore. The Coral Wars had ended not with the extinction of a species, but with the birth of a galactic civilization based on understanding and cooperation. It was, Louise reflected, the best possible outcome of humanity's first interstellar conflict. And it was only the beginning of their journey into the larger universe. As they boarded the transport that would take them to their next diplomatic mission, Louise felt the familiar excitement of exploration and discovery. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and humanity was finally ready to explore it not as conquerors, but as friends. The war that had nearly destroyed two civilizations had instead taught them both the most important lesson in the universe: that consciousness, in all its myriad forms, was precious beyond measure. And that understanding, no matter how difficult to achieve, was always worth the effort. The stars awaited, and humanity was ready to answer their call.